Number 10. Tony Stark. Yet another time where Tony has gone off the rails a little bit, this time taking place in the Axis event, in which the morality of Earth's heroes and villains were reversed by magic. While the spell was undone, the now corrupt Tony managed to shield himself and thus retained his evil personality, even though most of Earth's heroes reverted back to their usual selves. With his still vast intellect and suave personality, this darker Tony was able to infiltrate society and build an empire for himself, growing into an egotistical monster, releasing the Extremis 3.0 virus to the public as an app, addicting people to the substance and then depriving them of any further upgrades until they paid his fee of $100 per day. This caused a ton of suffering as a large portion of society basically became addicts and were enslaved to Tony's will. Now, like I said though, this Tony retained his intelligence. He knew exactly what he had to do to balance his cruelty in order to prevent the world from rising up against him. So he engaged in hostile takeovers of many companies, forcing them to promote his extremist apps through blackmail, and even went as far as unleashing an army of advanced drones to act as personal police force. By every definition of the word, he just became a tyrant. Number 9. Ant-Man. During Marvel's Secret Empire event, you know, the one where Captain America revealed himself to be the supreme leader of Hydra, Ant-Man, like many of the other heroes, naturally sided with the hero side of things and was a dedicated member of the Underground. That is, until his daughter Cassie was abducted by Hydra and he was forced to not only comply with their every demand, but also report to them all the plans of the Underground resistance. While many of the plans he relayed weren't too major, he was forced to tell Hydra when the heroes managed to find 2 fragments of the Cosmic Cube, and that resulted in Hydra showing up at the Underground's doorstep. I will say though, to his merit, he did confess that he was involved with Hydra and tried to make amends for doing wrong by the team, and he also played a huge role in restoring Steve Rogers when the Cosmic Cube reformed. Now, if you've got the time, this storyline definitely deserves a read, starting with 2017's Secret Empire Volume 1, Number 0. Number 8. Avenger X. When the Avengers initially sought out to track down the Stranger alongside the X-Men, Professor X used Cerebro to locate and rescue Cressida from the cosmic being, and upon first glance, she seemed like the perfect weapon. Her powers augmented the strength and abilities of her teammates, allowing them to take on groups of supervillains with ease. As she was explaining what she was capable of, Scarlet Witch cut her off and just offered her a spot on the team, which honestly made sense because who wouldn't want someone like that on their team? But what they didn't realize is that there was actually a huge cost that comes along with her powers. In order to empower anybody and increase their abilities, she has to drain the lives of everyone and everything around her. And while they were unaware of this, Cressida was plotting to use this power of hers to finally end the Avengers for good, taking them down from the inside by absorbing their powers instead of empowering them. Captain America was the one who confronted Avenger X, and with her plot to divide the Avengers folded, Cressida disclosed the true extent of her abilities by siphoning the Avengers' life force and utilizing their combined powers to quickly defeat them. Number 7. Vision. Now, if you know Vision, then you know that he's not usually one to betray his team unless there is a quote-unquote perfectly logical reason for it. There was the time after he linked up with a supercomputer from Titan, and he thought the only way he could protect Earth was for him to run it himself. At first, he only wanted some additional power, and he helped Hawkeye establish the West Coast Avengers to expand the Avengers' influence, and even met with the leader of the free world about making the leader of the Avengers a cabinet position. When his schemes didn't give him the control he wanted in Avengers number 253, he took over nearly every computer on the planet, starting with the machines that controlled the world's weapons, and he went, let's just say, a little bit crazy with power. Interestingly enough though, that wasn't the only time Vision betrayed the Avengers, as there was a time that his actions cost the Avengers the trust of the federal government. Vision's difficulties with balancing his emotions got the best of him after he became the leader of the team. In trying to create world peace, Vision tried to control the world's computers and defense systems. He was opposed by the Avengers, who had to launch an attack on their own headquarters just to defeat him. Vision eventually realized his mistake and tried to atone for his crime, but unfortunately the damage was already done. Number 6. Quicksilver. Pietro Maximoff started off his costume career as Quicksilver on the wrong side of the law, working with his sister Wanda on Magneto's Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. Eventually deciding to reform, Pietro and Wanda would join the first new lineup of the Avengers alongside another former criminal, Hawkeye, under the leadership of Captain America. Quicksilver blamed the Avengers for his strained relationship on his sister and his wife, and he gave government information to get back at them. In 1986, the East and West Coast Avengers were playing baseball when they received a surprise visit from the Freedom Force, a group of X-Men and villains released from prison to work for the government. Mystique, leader of the Freedom Force, announced to the Avengers that they were to be arrested for treason. And after a fierce battle with the Freedom Force, Captain America agreed to surrender. At a hearing, the Avengers were told that someone had obtained proof that Vision's attempt to gain control of the world's computers was actually a plot engineered by the Avengers themselves. And the Avengers demanded to know who their accuser was, and after much suspense, the traitor was revealed to be none other than Quicksilver. Number 5. Sandman. To his merit, Sandman did actually make an attempt to reform. He received a full pardon for all his misdeeds and even served as a reserve member of the Avengers for a time. During his run as a hero, he was actually able to make friends with his former enemy Spider-Man, but Sadly, good things don't last forever, not even in comic books. In 1999, Sandman turned his back on his fellow heroes and joined up with his old partners from the Frightful Four, Wizard and Trapster. It wasn't entirely his fault since the Wizard used his ID machine to bring out the evil side of Sandman once again, but still. Sandman used the trust he had gained with Spider-Man to his advantage, allowing him a chance to take him by surprise. In returning to his villainous ways, Sandman not only betrayed Spider-Man, but the Avengers as well, causing his membership to be revoked. Number 4. Swordsman. The Swordsman was Hawkeye's mentor and a criminal who tried to join the Avengers just so that he could take advantage of the benefits. When they turned him away, he was approached by Iron Man's arch-enemy, the Mandarin, who gave him a new sword and a special mission: to infiltrate the Avengers and destroy them from the inside. Mandarin engineered a plot to trick the Avengers into thinking that Iron Man had vouched for the Swordsman. The ploy actually worked, and Swordsman was allowed entry, but not without gaining the suspicion of his new teammates. And honestly, rightly so, because Swordsman planted a bomb in Avengers Mansion, just as he was told to, but began to have second thoughts because of the feelings he developed for Scarlet Witch. When he tried to remove the bomb, he was caught by Captain America and forced into a fight. Despite the Swordsman's betrayal, years later he was actually forgiven and welcomed back onto the team alongside his wife Mantis. Honestly, I really think the Avengers are just a little bit too trusting sometimes. Number 3. Dr. Druid. While most would consider Dr. Druid to be a pretty obscure member of the Avengers, he's actually spent enough time with the team to make his eventual betrayal memorable. Dr. Druid is a sorcerer who practices Celtic magic that he picked up from the Ancient One. His magical abilities are overshadowed by another one of the Ancient One's peoples, Doctor Strange of course. I know it seems like he is just a minor character, but trust me, he is not. Dr. Druid was still a fairly new addition to the Avengers when he had the sudden impulse to become its leader. He started out by undermining the current leader, Captain Marvel, aka Monica Rambeau. He questioned every move she made and constantly stated that the Avengers needed a much stronger leader. And when Captain Marvel had to temporarily step down for medical reasons, Dr. Druid used his mental powers to manipulate the Avengers into electing him as the leader in Avengers number 294. And in this time, he also forced She-Hulk to fight her fellow Avengers, which ultimately led to her quitting the team. As it turned out though, Druid himself had been under the control of Kang's wife Ravonna, who used him to gain control of the rest of the Avengers, and after Druid was defeated and lost in the time stream, the Avengers actually disbanded for a while. Number 2. Wonder Man. The ionic energy-powered superhero Wonder Man has a long history with the Avengers that goes all the way back to his debut in Avengers number 9 in 1964, the same issue in which he also died. Wonder Man was resurrected years later and has become a staple in the Avengers ever since, either serving on the main Avengers team or in the West Coast branch. When Simon Williams first joined the Avengers, his life actually depended on betraying them, and here I'll explain why. Wonder Man acquired his powers from Baron Zemo and the Masters of Evil. Zemo used an experimental ionic ray to give him his powers, but the effects would end him if he didn't receive a weekly antidote. In order to get that antidote, Wonder Man had to infiltrate the Avengers' ranks and deliver them to the Masters of Evil. Wonder Man led his new team into an ambush, but changed his mind when the fighting started. He helped the Avengers defeat the Masters of Evil even though it meant giving up the antidote. Without Zemo's antidote, Wonder Man seemingly perished, but would eventually return and rejoin the Avengers. Another instance of betrayal by Wonder Man took place in the 2000s when he started being much more aggressive and hateful towards his former teammates. He believed that the Avengers were a disease that was destroying the world instead of making it better. The tension between Wonder Man and the Avengers came head to head when he gathered a team called the Revengers, a small group of heroes and villains with bitter feelings towards the Avengers. Wonder Man led his team in an all-out assault against the Avengers. When Wonder Man was defeated though, it was determined that his ionic energy was actually having an effect on his brain. And when he was finally cured, Wonder Man just apologized for all the trouble he caused, but he still was a traitor nonetheless. And number 1, the Protector. NAMOR is a Kree soldier who sided with Earth during the Secret Invasion. After taking the name Captain Marvel, the same name used by the Kree hero Mar-Vell, he joined Osborn's Avengers. After leaving the team, he became a member of the official Avengers team as the Protector. He served them very well for a time, and until Avengers vs. X-Men, which saw the world threatened by the coming of the Phoenix Force. The Avengers needed all hands on deck, meaning it was a bad time for one of their own to turn into a traitor. He betrayed the Avengers during the events of Avengers vs. X-Men, although he didn't actually side with the X-Men. If the Protector had his way, he would have helped the Avengers stop the Phoenix Force and continued to serve on their team. But as a Kree warrior, NAMOR felt compelled to comply with the Supreme Intelligence, who ordered him to steal the Phoenix Force sample from the Avengers and deliver it to the Kree Empire. NAMOR obeyed, even though the sample was a critical piece of the Avengers' plan to stop the Phoenix Force. When the Protector learned the Kree wouldn't honor their responsibility to protect Earth, he stole the sample back and wanted to rejoin the Avengers. The Avengers, however, wanted absolutely nothing to do with him, and honestly, I can't blame them.
Number 10, Hawkeye. In the MCU's Avengers in 2012, Hawkeye betrayed the Avengers by being brainwashed by Loki. Loki knew that having Hawkeye with him was valuable, and he could access many of the secrets that S.H.I.E.L.D. was hiding. Hawkeye launched an attack on the S.H.I.E.L.D. helicarrier that the Avengers so happened to be on so he could free Loki. He takes out one of the propeller systems on the helicarrier and invades it with his team. Hawkeye and Black Widow fight, with her hoping to free him from the spell. In the end, he's able to fight the spell because Black Widow hit him really hard in the head and was able to gain back control of his own mind. Number 9, Hank Pym. In the Avengers issue 213, Hank Pym received a court-martial for how he handled a situation in a fight with the Avengers. He definitely was not in a good place at the time and was a complete wreck. He still wanted to be a part of the Avengers team and wasn't ready to be forced off of it. He decided to design a robot that would attack him during the trial. The catch was that since he designed it, he knew how to easily defeat it. His wife, the Wasp, was completely against Hank doing this, but he didn't care. He told her to keep it a secret, and in the end, the Avengers did find out about the truth about Hank's plan and took him off the team. Number 8, Moondragon. In the comics, Moondragon has very strong mind control abilities, like telepathy and telekinesis. So when she stumbles upon a planet with the people of that planet ready for war, she wants to help them. She doesn't want these people to suffer over what will eventually happen if the war is to start: death. So she decides to control the entire race of people on this planet with her mind control powers to stop fighting. But she didn't just stop there. She went even further and made sure that the people of this planet would even worship her. She even wants to continue to do this throughout the universe. The Avengers find out, she brainwashes Thor to fight them, and she's later defeated and gets a device from Odin that dampens her powers to stop her from doing this ever again. Number 7, SENTRY. SENTRY is one of, if not the most powerful heroes in the Marvel Universe. He was recruited by Steve Rogers to be a part of the new Avengers. Unfortunately, SENTRY is not fully good. It does in fact have a little dark side of his personality called the Void. In a sense, the Void is the total opposite of SENTRY, and regardless of all the good SENTRY accomplishes, the Void can quickly undo that with his chaos. Norman Osborn basically manipulated and used SENTRY for his own agenda and got him to join the Dark Avengers, where he helped destroy Asgard and kill Loki as the Void. Thor was quite unhappy about this and ended up killing SENTRY, but no one stays dead long in the comics and he was later brought back to life. Number 6, Scarlet Witch. In Avengers Disassembled, Scarlet Witch goes crazy, all due to the fact that she really just wanted to have children who were real. But since she was with someone who was artificial, that wasn't really possible. But that didn't stop her from creating them. She used her powers to create the children that she always wanted to have. But what drove her mad was the fact that the children weren't technically real, and she couldn't stop thinking about that. She then basically uses her powers to tear the Avengers apart by making their lives complete hell, basically killing Hawkeye, Tony costing the Avengers a deal with the UN because he was drunk while speaking, and Vision getting split in half by She-Hulk. Number 5, Iron Man. Yes, there was even a point during the comics where Tony betrayed the Avengers. Well, sort of, anyways. During the crossing, Tony's brain gets corrupted by Kang the Conqueror. He was trying to control him by making him go crazy. Kang even gets him to frame Hawkeye. Once the Avengers find out, they go back in time to find a younger Tony to help them stop the older Tony. Now, this story was a bit confusing, with some even believing that Tony wasn't as mind-controlled as we all believed he was, since in the end, he didn't even seem surprised by anything he found out that he did while working for Kang. Number 4, Namor. During the Avengers vs. X-Men series, Namor left the Avengers and went on the side of the X-Men. Now, to be clear, the X-Men were only trying to apprehend the Avengers, but Namor planned something much more evil. And by evil, I mean he found out that the Avengers were in Wakanda and thought that was the perfect plan to take them out would be to drown them with a huge-ass wave. It didn't end up working for Namor, and instead only enraged the Wakandans wanting revenge for what he did. From there, Namor and Wakanda became rivals. This rivalry is something that fans have wanted to see be a part of the MCU since the introduction of Wakanda in Black Panther in 2018. Number 3, Hulk. In the comics, at one point, Hulk came to the conclusion that the Avengers disliked him, and that really irritated the Hulk, which is something that you really don't want to do, especially to the Hulk. He ends up leaving the team and trying to work with Namor to get revenge on them. Apparently, even though Hulk and Namor were working together, they weren't going to stay loyal for long after their plan was complete. In the end, and before the battle was complete, Hulk turned into Bruce Banner and took off and disappeared. Number 2, Black Widow. So in the comics, Black Widow has turned on the Avengers at one point. Now, in her defense, she was being blackmailed by Weeping Lion with the goal to go rogue and turn on S.H.I.E.L.D. During this time, she allowed herself to be brought back to the Avengers Tower by Tony Stark. She only let him take her back there to gain access to his equipment. So she knocked him out and took what she needed. Also, during the MCU's Civil War, she also turned on Tony Stark and ended up jumping ship and siding with Captain America. Number 1. Captain America. This was a huge shocker at one point in the comic and was a jaw-dropping moment when fans were reading it. The reveal that Captain America was really a Hydra agent all along sent shockwaves through the fanbase. How could the Star-Spangled Man be evil? He has always proven to do anything he had to protect his family, team, and his country. It turns out that a cosmic cube had altered Steve Rogers' history in a major way, making him this Hydra agent and betraying everything he stood for. It led Rogers to take over America with Zemo, all in the name of Hydra. Desperate to stop this, Ant-Man and the Winter Soldier went into the pocket dimension to find Steve Rogers' consciousness. They were able to use the Cobra to save Steve Rogers' true form. Evil Steve Rogers fought good Steve Rogers in the end, and good prevailed, and evil Steve Rogers was defeated by good Steve Rogers wielding Mjolnir in an epic battle.
Kicking off the list at number 10, Sandman. William Baker entered the world of comics in 1963 with Amazing Spider-Man issue 4. He was seen as one of the main villains in Spider-Man 3, and yes, he was at one point an Avenger. Who knew? So when Flint Marko held the mantle of Sandman, he bumped into the Thing, and they had a little heart-to-heart, a little chat about life and how to use your abilities perhaps for, for good. So he started to help Spider-Man a bit here and there, and then in Avengers issue 329, Captain America announced a new Avengers team, and on that roster was the Sandman. He was one of the 7 reserve members. He of course didn't last because, well, he was a reserve member for one, and coming from the villain side already, I'm sure he had one foot out the door anyways. Shame. And before we continue on with this list, guys, if you haven't already, make sure to hit that like button down below because those little thumbs up are great for the page and great for our studio. You guys are the best. Thank you so much for watching. Now back to some Avengers who became villains. Number 9, Sentry. Making his first appearance in Sentry issue 1, of course, Robert Reynolds was a struggling addict who made his way into a laboratory and discovered something called the Golden Sentry Serum. So of course he consumed it, and then he got the surprise of a lifetime when he was then given the power of 1,000,000 exploding suns. That's a lot of power. That plus a homemade costume equals a brand new superhero. Robert fought alongside the X-Men, the Fantastic Four, then the new Avengers. Things changed for Robert when Norman Osborn decided to put together a little team of his own, the Dark Avengers. So Sentry was also once a Horseman of Death, serving alongside Banshee, Grim Reaper, and Daken. He even considered himself as the heir to Apocalypse at one point, so definitely not an Avenger anymore, for sure. Number 8, Namor. King Namor is of course Marvel's version of Aquaman. He's the king of the seas, and he's also not a fan of metahumans, surprisingly. He mostly would go head to head with Black Panther and Wakanda. He wasn't a fan of Wakanda. He often attacked it quite a bit. He was asked to join the Avengers back in 1963 in Avengers issue 16, but he declined. Too cool for school. We get it. All right, cool. He did join for a brief amount of time though, but when the Avengers vs. X-Men happened, he stood with the X-Men and he fought Luke Cage and the Thing. What a traitor. I mean, he's not the worst, but if you're not with the Avengers, you're clearly against them, especially after you've helped them out for a bit and then you change your mind. Come on, dude. Number 7. The Incredible Hulk. So Thor Ragnarok was loosely based off the Planet Hulk storyline. I say loosely because, well, the comics, that story didn't end up going so well, obviously. Because on Sakaar, the rocket that he arrived in ended up blowing to smithereens, causing some casualties that left the Hulk a little heartbroken, to say the least. So he rolls his shoulders back a few times, and then he heads back to Earth, and thus begins the World War Hulk storyline. He just destroys everybody. It's so scary. I mean, all the heroes that Earth has come to love just in the path of this death train. Like, he locks the Illuminati in Madison Square Garden and then makes them fight to the death. It's like Madison Square Up Garden. I mean, once you spend enough time on Sakaar, I guess it becomes second nature. I don't know. The whole story is a bloody good mess. It's great seeing the panic on the Avengers' faces the entire time because they know that they're screwed, and that's what makes it real and scary. Number 6, Sabretooth. Victor Creed made his debut in Iron Fist issue 14, and he's been known as one of Wolverine's biggest rivals. But during the Avengers X-Men Axis storyline, the Red Skull stole the brain of Charles Xavier, and he planned to wipe out all of mutant kind. And then in book 2, we see the inversion, where good goes bad and bad goes good. Interesting time. because Dr. Doom and Scarlet Witch cast a spell, so now Sabretooth was on the good side. So after the dust settled, Iron Man made it so that Sabretooth wouldn't flip back, so Sabretooth joined the Avengers Unity Division. This didn't last forever, and recently in House of X issue 6, Sabretooth faced trial among the Quiet Council, and let's just say he ended up swallowed by Krakoa below the surface, where he's trapped in a state of permanent stasis for the rest of his life. How comfortable. I mean, he kind of made it easy for them too. He clearly didn't fight for his case. Number 5, Hawkeye. In the MCU, Hawkeye's had it pretty rough. I mean, by the time Avengers Endgame rolled out, Clint had lost his entire family, and then 5 years after Thanos snapped his fingers, we catch up with him in Tokyo, and he's not the same guy that we once knew. Now he's taken heads and he's taken names. We get our first look at Ronan. Now, I know that Natasha meets up with him and they have a beautiful moment, and then he rejoins the team. He even volunteers to test the time travel tech himself. But if we look back at Avengers 1, Hawkeye is a villain for like most of that movie. He turns evil before the opening title even pops up on screen. He's the guy who took down the helicarrier. He almost killed everybody on that boat. Now, I know Loki had a scepter and that caused it, so if we look at Avengers 1 and Avengers Endgame, I think it's safe to meet in the middle and say that the MCU Hawkeye has been somewhat of a Avenger who turned into a villain, at least for a bit. Number 4, Quicksilver. Pietro Maximoff is the twin brother of Wanda Maximoff, and in Avengers West Coast issue 57 back in 1965, he joined the team. Pietro has been trouble for the team for a long time. I mean, he convinced Wanda to do what she did in House of M. He's framed the Avengers for treason, and he has no problem using pieces of Terrigen to give his daughter Luna special abilities, even though he knows he shouldn't do that. Also, that whole thing with Layla Miller after House of M, where he saved her life just so he can be the one to take her out, believing that she was responsible for the House of M event. Yeah, it's safe to say he went from Avenger to villain. Like, those are just 3 out of many things. In West Coast Avengers 33, Magneto's bloodline got the best of him, and he got fellow Avengers captured by the communist gang. Fastest guy ever, but makes the most mistakes. I don't understand. Number 3, the Vision. Making his glorious debut in Avengers issue 57, the Vision is a synthezoid, and in the comics, he was created by Ultron using parts of the original Human Torch and the mind of Wonder Man. Just bam, smack together. He turned on his original creator, Phineas Horton, and he joined the Avengers. Nice. And then in the MCU, he's created as Ultron's new body, but with the addition of the Mind Stone and a little bit of Jarvis, we have an android Avenger. Also nice. But during the Secret Empire storyline, Vision was part of Hydra's Avengers when they were taking over the world, all from an AI virus. Gotta get that firewall installed, my friend. Arnim Zola was the one to blame for that. So who knows, maybe now with the White Vision being free in the MCU and pretty much reborn, his firewall probably isn't the best either. Also, it's confusing because it appears that Vision gets all of his memories back, but then he flies away and then he's not to be seen for the rest of the show. So clearly something's up here. I'm betting the MCU does him dirty. Maybe they reprogram him to make him evil or something. Or he might become Ultron. That was a big theory for WandaVision. We'll see. Number 2, Captain America. There are a couple lines from Steve Rogers that fans will remember that took place in the MCU, like Avengers Assemble, that is America's ass, but the line Hail Hydra was followed by a roar of applause on opening night of Endgame. Why? Because not only does he use his post-Avengers knowledge to obtain the scepter, which in that of itself is already pretty sweet, but because the audience expects another cool elevator fight and Steve outsmarts us. But the line Hail Hydra comes right from the comics, and a bit of a darker scenario. The last words of Captain America Steve Rogers were that of Hail Hydra, and fans were not happy. This was huge news. People were pretty upset. Readers were sending in death threats. Like, could you imagine? The 2017 series Secret Empire concluded that bad Captain America was a double and that the good guy was locked in the cosmic cube. Okay, solid save, but those images of evil Steve will live in our heads rent-free, so thank you for that. And finally, number 1, Scarlet Witch. Of course, I'm saving her for last, of course. She's the daughter of Magneto and the twin brother of Quicksilver, aka Pietro Maximoff. Now, she was on her father's Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, but at one point she did of course join the Avengers as well. She's one of the biggest Marvel characters ever, and during the events of M-Day, she spoke those 3 words, "No more mutants," and just like that, a mass amount of mutants were depowered or wiped out. That large number being 986,618, only leaving a couple hundred left. That's crazy, that's like Thanos level destruction almost. And then in the MCU as well, we just watched Wanda become a villain over a 9-week period. She had a mental breakdown similar to M-Day, and she trapped Westview in her hex. Now, of course, she frees everybody and things look pretty back to normal, kind of, by the end of the show. But with that after credit scene of her studying the Darkhold, and with the given knowledge that Wanda is in the next Doctor Strange movie, she's for sure going to become a villain. Even for a little bit, she'll be a villain, for sure. I can't wait to see what else she does. She looked like she was studying up pretty fast while she was sipping tea on her doorstep, so I don't know. Her mind's crazy. She can do anything she wants.